Lesson 1.6 of our California Indian Foods Unit is titled Woodlands Keystone Species Exploration. In this lesson, students will build upon their knowledge base from the previous two lessons about keystone species in order to build a food web using species from the Oak Woodlands ecosystem cards. Students will also learn how they can be an ally to Native communities and support their use of land stewardship and integration of traditional ecological knowledge to support healthy ecosystems. Students will learn from a Coast Miwok professor as well as a respected elder from Sherwood Valley Band of Pomo Indians.
I'm Peter Nelson, and my tribal affiliation is Federated Indians of Greaton Rancheria, and I'm Coast Miwok.
My name is Buffy Schmidt. I'm from Sherwood Valley Band of Pomo Indians in Willits, California, Noyo Reservation in Fort Bragg, California, and Yoqueo Rancheria in Ukiah, California.
What it means for working together between non-Native and Native peoples, I think we have to work together. There's a really great need to do that because there are so many lands that are owned by non-Native people, whether those are agencies, the government, private landowners. And so, there's a really great opportunity to open up access to all of these different places that are all tribal lands, but they're not necessarily in the possession of or control of Native peoples. And so working through different relationship building processes, I think that we can get to a place where we can have really productive relationships that again opens up access to all these different areas. And what we see in California today on the very grand scale is that we're dealing with all of these different wildfires in areas where people just have been neglecting really the land management or land stewardship that needs to happen. And so that's this patchwork of private and public lands and a whole variety of different ways of approaching that. And so by building these relationships, collaborating, and really working with people, maybe through agencies to get to private landowners as well, it can open up access for gathering practices as well as stewardship.
When non-Natives are allies to Native communities, we all benefit from that. We're going to all thrive because it should be all of our goals to coexist and to understand each other. And when we have allies in the non-Native community, that means that we can work together and co-manage the places that used to belong to us. And hopefully they'll have an understanding why the traditional foods, traditional medicines, and the basket weaving materials are so important for us to be identified as Native people, to connect with our culture, and to remain indigenous people of this land.
Doing more, going beyond just an acknowledgement that that Native people have been here but are still here. And what is it that you're doing? How do you move through the world with your own relationships to the land, to tribes in the area, to other people, and just being a good person in that world? What do you do advocating for policy that supports tribal sovereignty, tribal efforts to gain access to land, all of those sorts of things. So there are lots of things that people can do that you don't necessarily think about. There are development projects going on all of the time that may impact significant cultural resources or environmental resources. So people can get involved in different ways, or at the bare minimum, learn about what these issues are and try to be a little bit more engaged than not paying attention at all.
There are many ways that non-Natives can be respectful and responsible guests on our original territories. In the old ways, gathering our foods and medicines and our basket weaving materials was a social event. You would get all the people that were basket weavers or food people and gather. I have to go on other people's property to gather these materials, the basket weaving materials, the traditional materials that I use. And I have to be quick because I'm not supposed to be there on our original lands. And a lot of times this is my own territory. And when I bring my grandkids, I have to make them be quiet because we don't want to be heard. We don't want to be seen. We just want to get our materials that we use and get out of the way. And it's kind of fun for them, but it's sad for me to have to tell them to be quiet because we're going to be feed or fined or ticketed or even put into jail because we're trespassing. And this is an ongoing thing, and it's been going on for years and years and years from the time my mom has been gathering. But there are private landowners who allow basket weavers and traditional gatherers of food and medicine to go on their properties, and that's being respectful and a responsible ally to us. And I really do appreciate that.
Living beings, on tribal lands are really important to tribal people, whether they're human beings, non-human beings, rocks, and things that we don't think of in Western society as being animate objects. There's kind of spirit in all of these things, and there's a significance to all of them as well. And all of them support culturally what we do, as tribal people. So from the tools that we have to the medicines that keep us healthy and the food that supports our life, the water in the streams and lakes and rivers and oceans, all of those things create a balanced ecosystem and a world for us to live in, and we're part of that world as well. And so we can't think of ourselves as separate from that, and some of the hard things that go on with that relationship as well. So, when you're burning through an area, a lot of times we think of that as a very positive thing, and it certainly is, but, there's life and death that's connected. Hunting is another one of those practices that, you may take a life, but you need to honor that life because it's giving you food. So there are these reciprocal relationships, creating habitat for those species that sustain your life.
Other living beings in our territory include our basket weaving materials, our medicines, and our traditional foods that are growing. These are all living things. And the Creator has many people, the rock people, the tree people, the mountain people, the sky people. In the old ways, all of these living creatures spoke to us. They're trying to tell us something. These creatures, these living beings in the environment, in the ecosystems, have knowledge for us to be living today, just like we were hundreds and hundreds of years ago. All of our medicines that treat our illnesses today are there. All the foods we need to survive and thrive are there. We don't need to go to the pharmacist. We don't need to go to the doctor. We don't need to go to the grocery store. Everything that could sustain us is out in our environment. And unfortunately, some of that is been poisoned by pesticides, by industrialization, by overharvesting. That's one way that our allies could help us, is by keeping these places safe for us to gather.
There are a lot of things that we can do to protect non-human beings in the world. From stewardship, learning from your elders about essentially appropriate practices and protocols. If you learn in school about what creates healthy ecosystems and help out with those sorts of things. There are even just very little things that you can do as you're going out on hikes and parks, because we have things like sudden oak death that's impacting especially tan oak, but our black oaks and other oak species. And we can help out with not spreading that disease by spraying our shoes with alcohol, a really high concentration of alcohol or bleach or something like that. And so that's just like, how we've had this COVID pandemic and we have to wear masks inside, sanitize our hands, all of that, so that we don't spread that among our own community. Well, the trees are going through that same sort of thing. And so if we tune into these different things that go on with these plant communities, we can make sure that we're not part of that problem and we're helping out with all of these plants and animals as well.
Perfect.
We can protect these other beings, plants, and our relatives by thinking of them as our relatives. You wouldn't hurt your relative, you would feed them, you would take care of them. So in that way, we should be doing that to our environment as well. We should have respect for the gifts that the Creator has given us and honor those gifts. When you cut down a flower or cut down a tree, they've given their life for you. So one way to respect that is to use that material. And if you're not going to use it, you should not be cutting it down.
Non-human beings that are all around us, definitely affect our cultural practices. If you, look at our stories, the earliest stories are about the animals. They teach us how to be, what our protocols are for living in the world, and part of their character teaches us something about, our place in the world as well. And, they also are, in everything that we do. So if you look at the songs and the dances, there are elements from the animals in those, in the regalia, in clothing, all of these things that we adorn our lives with and carry with us and through the world. And the relationships that we have with these different places and the significance of those, that all plays into our relationship with the world and how we view it, the lens through which we view it. And that is definitely very heavily impacted by the animals because they're a community just like we're a community, humans and non-humans alike.
We have to get back to a more symbiotic relationship with our animal relatives. And over harvesting, over hunting is not the way of our ancestors. It's hard to see and imagine how that might have been so many years ago. But I believe if we all keep an open mind, if we all think outside the box, if we take leaps of faith, we can get closer to the way it used to be and be in a good relationship with all of our relatives, the animals and animals of the dirt, of the sky, and of the land.
In this activity, students will create a food web using species and information provided in the Oak Woodlands ecosystem cards. The food web will be completed using their understanding from the previous lesson on energy transfer. This is a great group activity that will engage small groups in building their own food webs utilizing 6 species cards and integrating the role energy transfer plays among the species. Students will also recognize the impacts that colonization has had on the food webs that they create. Now that students understand how Oak Woodlands creates a home for and provides nourishment to various species, students will understand the importance of protecting and supporting these habitats to create a healthy ecosystem. Allyship to Native communities in this lesson is a point to be highlighted in which non-Native people can learn to be a better ally to our environment and the ecosystems surrounding us. To continue to learn more about the importance of Oak Woodlands, please visit our Education Center on our website or visit our CIMCC curriculum channel on YouTube. The development of these educational resources was made possible with the funding from the National Endowment for the Humanities.